First off, to talk about the elephant in the room and the current pandemic situation and all that, one of
Hmm.
your uh, creeds, one of your taglines that you throw out at shows a lot is life is to be enjoyed, not endured. How do people do that in this time?
Oh, everybody has a different definition of how they enjoy life. That's up to them. It's not up to me. I mean, I've just taken the opportunity as much as I can to kind of relax. I've needed, I've needed, I've needed about a month's worth of sleep for about 15 years, and so finally with the pandemic, I got it. But everybody has to make their own decisions how they're going to enjoy their life. It's not up to me. It's not up to the band. It's not up to anything like that. It's up to everybody individually how they choose to enjoy their lives and how they define enjoying their life.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But people often, people get stressed out even in normal times and then go to
Yeah,
the endure, survival mode.
yeah.
Um, and then this is, to the very extreme. And so, you know, I don't know. It's just, you've always been such a proponent of that message. And I'm wondering, even though it's different for everyone, what can people do to get to that place?
Well, once again, my job isn't to sit there and tell people what to do. My job is just to kind of point to a possibility within, everybody individually, how I express certain things in my life and how other people express certain things in their lives are thoroughly different. What's going to be enjoying life for me is not going to be what's enjoying life for somebody else. And that's kind of what the band show and the whole band is about. It's not about saying do this activity, do this specific activity, or do that specific activity. It's like you have to find those answers out for yourself. It's kind of like the song "What You Gonna Do." I wrote that song about a very personal experience, and the
Hmm.
question is, what you gonna do about these things that have happened to you? And I'm the only person who can answer that. But somebody who listens to that song and may be going through a similar experience, or even just a similar vibe, you know, it's like they have to answer that to themselves. It goes back to the whole thing of like listening to blues records when I was a kid. I worked in a used record store in New Orleans, vinyl record store when I got my first job that was my second job. I was 11 years old. I got a job in a record store alphabetizing all these old vinyl records that were used. People would just give them away or throw them at garage sales or thrift stores. And this guy who I worked for, a guy named Roger Castillo out of New Orleans, he had the foresight enough to see that people would have, uh, you know, there would be a demand for this type of music. So back then, you literally had to pound the pavement to go find old music. It wasn't like you could find it on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify or anything like that. You literally had to go get in the car or catch a bus or walk to go find old music. And, I liken that to kind of like me discovering Bo Diddley when I was like 11 years old. Can I relate to what it's like to be an African American man in Chicago in the 50s trying to make his way through, life? And it's like, of course not. Of course not. I couldn't relate to it on a one-to-one level on any on any on any basis. But what I could do is I could relate to the emotion, the feeling of the experience, the feeling of, finding yourself, up against a wall, figuratively in your life, being frustrated, and then what you do with those emotions, what brings you to the betterment of your own personal situation. That's kind of what I think. People got to
Hmm.
make their own decisions. I mean, I'm not here to be do as I say, do this,
Yeah.
and blah blah blah. That's silly. And anybody who does that, chances are they probably got their hands in your wallet or they're trying to put them up your rear end.
Right. Yeah. Because I was going to say there's a lot of hucksters who make a lot
Yeah,
of money doing that. Hey, if you're like me, you'll
oh
be
yeah,
happy and all that kind
yeah,
of stuff, and which
exactly.
leads
No,
to further
and that's
depression.
not what the band puts out at all. The band puts out a joyous vibe, mostly to kind of, because it's what we enjoy doing. Number one, playing music and putting on something positive that gets a positive energy back. But number two, my thing was basically if you put this positive energy out there, then it gives people a choice to how they're going to react to that. They can, as I've said many times, a Cowboy Mouth show can just be a hell-raising, beer-drinking good time, or you can take it and say, okay, I never thought about things like that. Maybe I should enjoy my life more. How do I go about that? Well, that's up to me.
Hmm. And then you referenced the song "What You Gonna Do" earlier, which was
Yeah,
off
yeah,
of
yeah.
the
Mercyland
Mercyland
album.
album.
And
And
we also did it on Name of the Band Is Volume 1.
okay, yeah. And but I remember you talking about that, and you went through this experience, and that song came about because you were kind of asking yourself this
What am I going to
question.
do?
All right, what are you gonna
What
do?
am
What
I
are you
going to
gonna
do?
do? And then also, I was reading about the most recent, the Open Wide EP, and notes that you made about those songs. And there's the
Yeah.
song "King of the World," which you said was also a note to yourself. First off,
A lot of the songs I write are basically notes to myself without me
hmm,
being conscious of it. It's not like I sit there and go, I will tell myself this. A lot of it's a very subconscious process. And, sometimes you don't even realize it. And I say you don't. I don't even realize it until after the fact. I'll look at a song and go, oh, wow, I needed to hear that. It's, sometimes songwriting can be a pretty spiritual experience in that sometimes you find yourself telling yourself things that you need to hear. Does that
hmm,
make sense?
yeah.
Like in the idea of certain songs coming to you like that, or other songs that you have to work for. Um, anyway, what was your question?
But I don't remember who said this, but someone had a great line where they talked about people that write advice pieces on,
Hmm.
maybe it's how to do something or how to, get through life or whatever it is. And they said, really, inevitably, that person is writing a letter to their younger self, like who they
Yeah,
were in the
basically.
past. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, and you're saying more often than not, you don't realize it until after it's out, it's on the page, it's
Hmm.
recorded.
Yeah. A lot
Hmm.
of times, after I've written it, sometimes I'll kind of get a little personal epiphany. Oh, that's what that's about. Okay, I get it. Because you're just in the process, and when you're in the process of it, you kind of have to surrender your mind and your soul and let yourself become part of the whole universal mind, the universal idea that we're all part of. Like Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, said, the number of minds in the universe is exactly one, and we're all just parts of it. We're all just individual
Hmm.
expressions of it. And as a creative individual, and you know how this is, as a creative person, you tend to kind of find yourself getting the best results you can when you surrender to that moment.
Hmm. Well,
So
and
that's
then
kind of where it is with songwriting and even playing shows. That's why I enjoy playing shows, because shows are just a continual, constant creative challenge. Where can we go with this? Where can I go with that? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do there?
yeah.
And I really still enjoy it. In fact, that's the part of the whole Cowboy Mouth experience that I enjoy most. And, being stuck at home for 3 months while I have caught up on much needed sleep that I've needed for the past 15 or 20 years, I definitely want to get the hell out there on the
Right.
road again, because that's what we do. That's what I like to think that we're really good at. And
Yeah.
the communication of the band to our audience and vice versa is very powerful. It's a very strong relationship that we've worked a long time to cultivate. And I think, it's been really, really beneficial to us, obviously, but to, a lot of people over the years. I've gotten so many people that come up and just tell me the most wonderful, wonderful stories about how a certain song or a certain show affected them in this way. And, a lot of musicians get that. That's not exclusive to Cowboy Mouth in any way, shape, or form. But knowing that you're putting something, positive out there a positive energy, a positive experience for the world, and then in turn you kind of get that back in ways that you didn't really expect.
Hmm.
That's really gratifying, and that's what it's all about.
But in, that connection of the live show, in losing
Yeah.
yourself in the live show,
Hmm.
and keeping that in mind, because that's an integral part to every Cowboy Mouth show, you've
Well,
been doing a lot of these at home live stream shows, you acoustic. At the time of
hmm
this recording, we just recently announced you're going to be doing a full band live stream show.
yeah.
So,
hmm
as someone who's so in touch and so about connecting with the audience, how do you get your energy up when the audience is someone you cannot see and cannot hear?
Well, you just have to use your imagination. I mean, that's a large part of this job is the imagination. Believe me, I was playing rock shows for audiences that didn't exist when I was a kid. You know, when this band first started, I didn't have any money or anything like that, and not that I'm rolling in dough now, but I can afford to pay my bills and stuff. Back then, it was a matter of, okay, what do I do this month? Do I live on white bread and mayonnaise sandwiches, or do I keep the lights on? And I'm not complaining. It was the life I chose, and
Yeah.
I firmly believe in this life. You know, nobody has it easy. Some people have it easier, but nobody has it easy. So
Mm.
back then, I would spend a lot of time just walking, in this neighborhood I lived in uptown New Orleans, uh, and I would just walk for miles and just because I didn't have any, I didn't have any, lights on to watch television as before the internet or anything like that. And so I just keep walking and I just imagine myself playing a song or playing shows constantly. And it was just that imaginative power, that imaginative focus that I was able to put into the shows to kind of see what I wanted to do and see how I wanted to approach it and see how it felt to perform those shows and experience that feeling long before the shows were ever performed. So there
Mm.
was a lot of that. There was a lot of imagination at play, and there still is. I mean, I still imagine, I still see the shows we're playing long before we ever play them. It's one of the ways I rehearse, off the road, just kind of focusing and practicing a show in my head, and still having that experience without having the physical experience. And so that way, when I do perform in front of an audience, I can allow myself to kind of let go and let the moment take over. So it's not such a cerebral thing of me going, okay, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? And in terms of translating the experience from, say, a packed club to a TV studio where no one is in there besides us and the engineers, well, it's just like anything. You have to translate the energy. The energy is still there, but you just have to translate it into a different arena. Focus it on the camera, focus it on the room, focus it on the idea of the four of us playing with each other. And one of the things I learned a while back is that, it's as important to entertain the people on stage with you as it is the audience because
Mm.
they can sense anything that's going on the audience that is, can sense what's going on at a very intuitive level, whether they realize it or not. And if you have, if the four of us are giving our best and the four of us are having fun doing it, not always, like happy go lucky, it's not like up with people, but if they're having a very energetic experience that they're able to translate, that they're able to put that energy out there, the audience will pick up on it, whether it's on a camera or whether it's in a live room, whether it's in a club, whether it's an arena, whether it's a festival. The energy is always the same. It's
Mm.
just a matter of the direction that you put it in. So,
That's interesting though, because I've heard lots of people talk about, all right, we got to lift the audience up, we got to connect with them. It's not often you hear, I got to connect with these other guys on stage. I mean, musically, yes, but it's not often you hear them talk about, I have to lift them up as well as the people in the seats.
it's not a matter of lifting them up. It's a matter of making sure that they're on the same page, even if they communicate it differently. Like one of the reasons I love playing with Brian is because he's like me. He's a very visceral performer, right? Nat is a very cerebral guy, but in those moments when he loses himself, he really is gifted. And John's just John. He's just so of that moment, in
Mm-hmm.
that he's not even conscious of the fact that he's putting himself somewhere else. It's just where he usually is and where he usually likes to be, and so he can tap that in himself without any real effort. I've said this before. One of the best books I ever read about performing was a book that Jerry Lewis wrote called Dean and Me, and
Hmm.
it's about him and Dean Martin when they first got together and their subsequent career. They had a 10-year career. And a lot of people don't remember this nowadays, but they were as big as Elvis in their time, or the Beatles in their time, or any of the phenomenons we have in our time that people might be able to, whether it's Nirvana or Britney Spears. They were as big in their moment as any of those acts were, like the phenomenons. And they were just two performers who weren't really doing that well, and they lucked into a combination where they realized it was important for them to entertain each other, and then the audience really clued into that, because the story is that Jerry Lewis was a fan of Dean's. He just liked Dean as a person, but neither one of them had much of a career to speak of. And Jerry had booked himself into this club. Jerry had booked himself into this club in Jersey, and had asked the guy to hire Dean Martin as well. Dean Martin was kind of a suave Italian singer, really gifted singer, but real kind of a laissez-faire, kind of take everything easy kind of guy, And Jerry was this manic performer, just silliness crazy. And so they did their two acts. Jerry had gotten the club owner to hire Dean Martin, saying, "Oh, Dean and I do stuff together."
Mm-hmm.
The club owner's like, "Okay, cool." And so they didn't do anything together, and they're playing to an empty house, like 10 people.
Yeah.
And after the show, the club owner comes up and says, "Yeah, you said you guys did stuff." It's like, well, I mean, kind of, but not really, but kind of, but not really. The club owner who had this giant guy behind him says, "Yeah, next show you do stuff together, or you're going to be wearing cement shoes."
Right.
So they're like, "Oh, okay." So they wrote out a whole set list of just routines. It's like, if we get too far, we can go back to this point. We get too far, we go back to this point. And then it just clicked. And then, like, the crowd that night just broke up. I mean, they just loved it. They went out and did 2.5 hours just riffing, making each other laugh, obviously performing for the audience, but making each other laugh too. And then the next night they had 200 people. And then the next night there were lines around the block, and they were this huge phenomenon for 10 years. And, like in music, in movies, in television, in nightclub appearances, which were the big deal back then. But, they would play to like arenas full of 20,000 people, just two guys. And Jerry Lewis said in the book, and it's a real great book to read. It's short too. But it's very enlightening about how, what constitutes success, what constitutes being able to work together. And one of the things he realized is that the audience really enjoyed when he and Dean Martin would crack each other up, because it kept the energy up. And I realized that, and around like 2007 or 2008, I wasn't really enjoying the band because it had gotten to be a grind. We were still doing like 6-7 day a week tours for like months at a time, when a lot of our contemporaries had kind of gotten off the road full time. They would do tours every now and then when they would release an album or something like that, but we were still constantly going, and it just got to a point where I was burning out. And so I had to relearn how to enjoy what I do again. And one of the ways I relearned how to enjoy it was to really try to entertain the people around me, and, instead of just going through the motions, throwing things at them, throwing different things at them constantly, and that's one thing that Matt says. He never knows where the show's going to go, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of that energy, using your imagination to kind of see where you can go, but letting the moment take over too. And I think that can be done. I think that can be done over a camera in a studio. It can be done in a club. It can be done in an arena festival, whatever. I'm just lucky enough to be the guy doing it.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because it's come up in other interviews that they're
Shoot.
one of the ingredients a lot of musicians feel is that for a good show is there has to be some element of the unexpected,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
both for them and for the crowd.
Yeah.
I spoke with Chris Reed, the guitarist for Third Eye Blind, and he talked about
Mm-hmm.
an artist who shall remain nameless who said this person had an absolutely perfect show, and he went to see this artist, and it was flawless. He said, and I was bored to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whereas if there's an element like this may not work, or this could
Mm-hmm.
go off the rails at any moment,
Mm-hmm.
somehow that lends more energy, more immediacy,
More
and
immediacy. It's because it's a unique experience. I mean, one of the things about me that I never realized until somebody pointed it out years later was that I was never really afraid to walk the high wire and fall off without a net. Walk the
Mhm.
high wire without a net. I've never been afraid to do that. One of my earliest experiences was I was playing with this band in the mid to late '80s called Dash Rip Rock. I was the drummer for that band, and a lot of our fan base knows about them and my time in there. And I joined the band in 1985, and I was just a young pup. I didn't know anything about anything. And we played a bunch of shows with this band called the Georgia Satellites from
oh,
Atlanta, who are really good friends of ours. Keep your hands to
MC
yourself.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah, that was when that song was just starting to happen. And
Oh,
these
okay.
guys were just another Southeast bar band like we were, just kind of toughing it out and seeing what you could make happen. But we all got along really well, and their drummer let me play drums on this Chuck Berry song that I loved with him. It was great, and I was just playing. Here I was playing, with these guys who before then were idols of mine because I had their indie record before I joined Dash, and these guys were stars to me. And so, I was sitting there playing with them, and at the end of the song, I threw the sticks and I jumped on the bass drum, right? And my plan was to dive off the bass drum and do a graceful kind of pirouette or whatever.
Into the
Except
crowd?
I slipped.
Oh.
And my face hit the bass drum, and I landed on my back. And there's nothing like the sound of 800 people in one room collectively saying and or thinking to themselves, "Asshole,"
All right.
and just in that moment, I just learned, well, just get up. What am I going to do? Get my feelings hurt? It's just
Hmm.
you in this business you can't take things personally, and that was a problem I had for a while because I'd read a bad review and be like, no,
Yeah.
after a while you're just like, whatever, just get
Hmm.
up, brush yourself off, and I learned that it's not about the last note, it's about the next note. So,
Hmm.
there you go.
Although, among that, all though, what also struck me is that it seems to me that if you're going to be a band and survive, being able to adapt is really key. And during the tenure of Cowboy Mouth, the music industry has changed, in massive swings of the pendulum.
Radically.
Yeah. And yet you guys have always been able to adapt. And so, well, first off, would you say that is a key ability? And this live stream performance is yet another notch in you guys being able to adapt. Do you think adaptability is key for a band to be able to survive?
Well, that's just life. The only
Mm.
constant that you're ever going to experience in life is change. I mean, life's going to change constantly. When you think you have it figured out, life's going to change like that. No,
Mm.
that's just life. I think, you know, we always approach things, or we try to approach things with a certain amount of humor, a good amount of humor. Otherwise, I learned this, once again, going back to lessons I learned from years ago. My first traveling experience was with that band Dash Rip Rock. And one of the reasons I joined them was because the guitar player had ambition. It wasn't about just playing in New Orleans or Baton Rouge. He wanted to go to New York. He wanted to go to Los Angeles. And nobody else around the scene at the time was really talking like that. And so I joined, and I remember the first show we ever played on the road was a place called Black Mountain, North Carolina. We had driven easily 14 hours to get there. And we played there, and there I was, my first show on the road. I'm on the road, And so, and we played this weird little hippie bar to 3 people. One of them was the guy who owned the bar, and the other 2 were this couple that were just in there. It was like a Tuesday or Wednesday night. And the bar owner, he didn't like us. He's an old hippie, and we were kind of like George Jones or Hank Williams, played on 78 really fast, Right. And I'll never forget, this old hippie just walks across the stage, stops, looks at us, and just goes, keeps walking, goes to the door, goes outside, and locks us in the bar. So there was more people on stage than there were in the audience. So we're just like, well, and there was no other way out. And so we just we asked the couple, well, what do you want to hear? And I remember after the show, I was so upset. I was like, wow, this is really bad. This is my first road show. And I was really just kind of wondering if I'd made the right decision. And the bass player of the band, this guy named Ned Hickle, who's Ned Rathbone Hickle Jr. He's a dear friend of mine. His name was Hokey. His nickname was Hokey. So Hokey Hickle. And he always dressed up in a black cowboy hat, black sunglasses, black shirt, black pants, black boots. And he had smoked and drank pretty much everything. And his voice wasn't a voice as much as it was a collection of scars that just rubbed against each other. And he always talked like this. And he came around and he said, Fred, what's wrong? Just my first trip on the road, kind of sucked, It's like, well, Fred, sometimes you just got to laugh to keep yourself from crying. I was like, you know what? That's pretty smart. And I remember that Ned was very much a Zen master for me. He taught me a lot of the ways of the road, kind of took me under his wing, helped me grow up a lot. And that was one of them. It depends on how you approach the situation. If you have a certain expectation and that expectation is shattered, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Do you let that experience bring you down, or do you try to bring the experience up to your level? And that was kind of where I got the cowboy mouth thing of, 10 or 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you about that?
Yeah. And you've said it in shows, in fact, no matter if it's 10 people or 10,000 people, we're given the same, 120% every time.
It's going to be the best damn show that we can put on. It's going to be one of the best shows you ever saw. And that's just, that's pride in doing what you do. My favorite feeling of the night is walking off stage and knowing that, I or we gave the very best we could. We did, a damn good show. It's just that pride in what you do. It's not about, you can't base it on the audience. You can't base it on the size of the audience or, whatever you're supposedly going to make financially or whatever or any of that stuff. You have to find that pride within yourself because that's the whole thing that makes it truly valuable to you.
It also sounds like you're very good at drawing that line in the sand of these are the things I can control and these are the things I can't control. And I'm going to put all my energy behind what I can control. Can't control, the total of number of people in the crowd or whatever may happen on the way to the show, et cetera, et cetera. But once I'm on the stage, that's within my domain.
Yeah. I mean, what's the old story about Bono from U2? The first 2 years they were slugging it out. whether they played to a room of 5 people or 10 people, he played to a room full of 10,000 in his mind. And, he
Hmm.
would see that and he would make that happen. I do the same thing. It's all about imagination and humor.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, even during like the supposedly our salad days of like like the Jenny Says period, we still, the trajectory was always like this. You never
Yeah.
knew what to expect. Like I was talking to my wife about it yesterday because she was asking me. I said, well, the most number of people we ever played was probably before Dave Matthews, I think, at Jazz Fest, either 99 or 2000 in New Orleans. We played to 160,000 people. We had a pretty good show,
Wow.
right? And the next day we were booked to play this college date in a football field in South Louisiana. And, we had played to 160,000 people, our biggest audience ever. And so we're playing to a football field in Cajun country in Thibodaux, Louisiana. And so, giant PA, giant setup, and they're spending a fortune. You naturally think this is going to be a big deal. Well, they also booked it on Jazz Fest weekend. And in Louisiana, nothing else goes on except Jazz Fest. So we played this giant football field to maybe 100 people. But, we went out there and we just kicked a lot of ass because, I mean, what are you going to do? If you enjoy yourself, the time passes faster. If you give
Hmm.
if you give that energy of yourself, it's more rewarding. If you do the best you can, it's a more positive experience for everybody. I've
Yeah.
had like a few gigs, and I mean literally just a few, where I was just like, nope, I'm not doing this. I don't want to do this.
Hmm.
But thankfully they've only been a few.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really, really, really fortunate, but at the same time, I've busted my ass to create a lot of that good fortune, as have
Hmm.
we all.
Yeah. Yeah. And then speaking of the solo acoustic gigs you've been doing,
Mhm.
it's you with a guitar, which,
Yeah.
most concerts it's you behind the kit.
Yeah.
But it got me thinking, because I think you write most of your songs on the guitar, but I'm curious
Well,
how often. No?
it depends on the song. Um,
Okay.
Sometimes they just come to me and I don't need a guitar, and sometimes I actually have to hammer them out. So it
Mm.
depends on the song. Like you could pick a song and then ask me, how did this happen? And I'll say, okay, boom, boom, boom. That's one of the things about songs. Like for many years, I would go through this thing of trying to write like a diary or keep a journal or something like that. And then I just realized, well, hell, I got this whole song catalog. That's my diary. That's my journal right there. I know when I wrote them,
Yeah.
where I wrote them, what the situation was, what kind of pushed me to do it, how I wrote it, you know, for what reason, if there was one, stuff like that. So there's that kind of thing. Playing guitar is something I enjoy doing. Here's what I figured out early on, because I could play a lot of instruments. I could play the guitar, I could play the bass, I could play the piano, I could play the drums. When I played guitar, you know, I was just another guitar player. When I played bass, just another bass player. When I played piano, I would spend too much time trying to figure out the chords. But when I played drums, I don't know what it was, and I still don't know what it is. But when I play drums, people pay attention. They really
Hmm.
pay attention. And that's how come I decided to really make my career as being a performing drummer. I mean, obviously, I love to sing and blah, 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 but that was the thing I noticed when I played drums, people took notice because it was something. It wasn't. It wasn't the usual thing. It was like, oh, this is different, and they paid attention to me. I don't know why. I still don't know why, and I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to throw false humility. I know it on an intuitive level that people pay attention to me when I play drums. It's like, okay, cool.
And then you're self-taught as a drummer, right?
I'm self-taught as everything. I just,
What do?
for whatever it was, I got it at a very early age. I got it.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean I didn't work for it. I worked to perfect what I do very hard over the years. And obviously, when I first started playing music when I was 5 years old, obviously I wasn't anywhere what I like to believe as good as I am now. But at the same time, music, it just made sense to me. The whole thing just made sense to me.
Hmm. But what was the advantage, do you think, of being self-taught?
There's pros and cons. I mean, I went at my own pace. It was something that I was able to allow myself to express myself not only musically but emotionally as well, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, it was something that no one could take away from me. It was like this little secret I had. In
Hmm.
fact, one of my earliest experiences of playing drums was when I was a senior in high school. There was this guy in my class who wanted to form a band with some other seniors, and I was kind of a misfit, or at least I perceived myself to be a misfit. And this guy, he was a guitar player, really talented guy. He formed a band later, a New Orleans band called Lump. A guy named Lou Teveno. He was the guy who first turned me on to the Clash. He told me, he gave me this album. Said, "Go home and listen to this." It's like, I don't want to hear this. He says, "Go home and listen to this, or else I'm going to kick your ass." He was a big guy. And so I listened to it, and it's just like, wow. It was the same experience of listening to like Bo Diddley. You just, for whatever reason, I related to this sound.
Hmm.
It spoke to me. And so anyway, he wanted to form a band with some seniors, other seniors who played music, and all five of us came from a completely different place. But there was this teacher there. His name was Mike Baracos, and he had to watch us during his lunch period so we could have access to the school auditorium. And we did like one rehearsal, and it was just terrible. And I just got so frustrated that I just started banging out the drums and just really just going at it. And I took my drum stool and flipped it up in the air and watched it crash, just to see, just to watch it burn. And and I just got so much satisfaction out of it. And Mr. Baracos, he was a teacher. He walks up to the stage, "LeBlanc, see me after school." And I was like, "Oh, great, wonderful, wonderful." Anyway, so I spent the whole day kind of dreading it, and then I get to his office after school because he was a guidance counselor as well as a teacher.
Oh.
And so I sat down and kind of slump-shouldered, and he shuts the door, sits down, looks me in the face and says, "LeBlanc, whatever you do in your life, do not ever stop playing the drums because you're too good at it." I was like, "Oh,
Wow.
that's not what I expected." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Hmm.
Because, I thought I was okay, but I didn't think anybody else thought I was okay. And, it's like, okay. And, he gave me some encouraging words, and that was really something that really, so it's a little formative experience of just the world's way of just saying, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
Was one of them. And it was wild because we played in Memphis about a year or two ago, and he and his wife came to the show, and I
Oh.
had no idea. He had moved up to Memphis because of the whole Katrina thing about 10 years before or 15 years before, and I was like, man, that really helped me out, and I really do appreciate it. I made a sting from him from the stage, and I think he really enjoyed it. Nice people, so.
No, that's very cool. And
That's right.
I don't know, it also speaks to the idea of, because nowadays with the internet and social media, there are tons of guys playing in their basement,
Yeah.
and they are doing the most complex polyrhythmic patterns and all this kind of stuff.
A lot of
But
talent out there. There's a lot of
right,
talent out
but a lot of those guys are not getting out of their basement. And one thing that's always fascinated me is you can be really technically adept at an instrument, but not know how to necessarily make music with it or
there.
hold a crowd with it.
Yeah.
And so, what would you say is the difference? Where do you direct someone so that it's like, okay, never mind playing 13/4 or whatever the hell you're doing,
Mhm.
Give me a beat that resonates with people.
Um, okay. There's different ways of looking at that. These days, EDM is really popular. I mean, that's the prevailing trend with, teenagers, 20 somethings, and
Mm-hmm.
you run into that thing of you get the older generation say, well, that's not music. In my day, we had real music, and it's just a cycle that perpetuates itself. It's expression. It's the human spirit, trying to communicate in a creative and beautiful way with itself. Um, as far as playing a beat goes, is the best music, in my opinion, the best music comes when you're trying to express how can I say that? How can I say that without sounding like a douche? Um, which is French for shower. Um, for me, the best music is made when you have the human spirit trying to not only express itself, but free itself from the confines of, space, time, job, work, school,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Just the expression of energy freeing itself from the confines. And I've always found that to be really something that you can find, whether it's Elvis Presley playing, playing That's All Right Mama on accident in a studio. It's just the sound of the human spirit. It's the same thing with EDM. It's the same thing with, a band like Led Zeppelin playing live in the 70s. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of just the human spirit, freeing itself from the confines of, this life.
Yeah. Okay. And this might seem a weird correlation, but to me they're connected in terms
Sure.
of freeing the human spirit. You wrote a children's book called Fred the New Orleans Drummer Boy. The
Yes.
the key phrase that runs throughout that is don't get scared, get excited.
Get excited. Yeah, it's the same energy. You just
Right.
put it in a different. You just put it in a different direction.
Okay.
I'm very much as
Now,
I've gotten older, I've become a real spirit of energy because my talent, when I understood this very intuitively at an early age, my talent wasn't necessarily playing music or singing or being a front man or a drummer. My talent was understanding at a very, very, very basic level how to move great amounts of energy almost effortlessly. I mean, I think anybody can do it, and we all do it to a certain extent. But I had a very tangible understanding of it at a very, very early age, and I can't tell you why. And I just chose music to be that venue that I used in order to move great amounts of energy. And so the book was something that just kind of came about. It's kind of like it's like a miniature child version of a Cowboy Mouse show, because you have the conflict with the bass player who's good but he's scared to play in front of an audience.
yeah.
Then the kids just say, no, don't be scared, be excited. It's the same energy. There's still that churning of energy, but what do you do with it? Do you use it as something to build a wall between yourself and the experience, or do you use it as like a slide or a ramp to kind of help you go go faster and further into the experience? It's the same thing, and
Yeah.
it's just understanding what to do with the energy, what direction to put the energy in, and using it in a way that benefits not only you but everyone and everything around you, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about.
And then, but in this weird time that we're going through,
Mm-hmm.
how do you relate that? How do you send that message, or what's the message that you would give to a kid now, as far as trying to make the best of this bizarre situation and
Well,
not get
you
scared.
know, well, it's not just don't get scared, get excited. It's also a matter of understanding that while this moment is the only moment we can really experience, having the knowledge and the faith and the imagination to understand that this here moment, this situation is not going to last. It's like the Avenue, the song "The Avenue." When I wrote that song, it was like a week after Katrina, and it took me a little while to kind of perfect it, to tinker with it a little bit. The basic germ of it was there. I had this idea. I had pictured New Orleans as a person, as a friend who had been in a really, really, really bad bar fight. And
Hmm.
I pictured myself putting my arms around this friend of mine named New Orleans and saying, yeah, this is really, really bad. This is really bad. But, we'll get past it. We'll get through it and we'll get to the other side of this, and, you just gotta, dust yourself off, pick yourself up and just go kick ass. And that's what it takes, it's not about saying, oh, please, please help me, please save me, please save me. I mean, in the ultimately nobody saves you. You have to save yourself. And I think what this thing that we're going through right now is it's very temporary. When we look back on history, there'll be a lot of things we could have learned to have done better. There'll be a lot of things we can pat ourselves on the back and say, okay, we did all right. But, it's not going to last. You know, Human beings are not made to be kept down. I mean, that's just human history. I mean, the human spirit is always trying to expand itself. It's always trying to express itself. It's always trying to free itself from the constraints of, of others or self-imposed constraints, whatever, however you want to look at it. And the song "The Avenue" is about daring to have that imagination and that faith and that tenacity to know that not only will things get better, but I'm going to be a part of making them better. What's that book? Viktor Frankl, Man's
Oh,
Search for
Man's Search
Meaning.
for
Man's
Meaning.
Search for Meaning. Yeah, he was he was a Viennese psychiatrist or psychologist, and he got caught up in the whole Holocaust thing. It was in concentration camps. And, one of the ways he dealt with it was by, you know, in the times, that he was allowed to rest, which weren't many, he would let his imagination go and see himself enjoying a great life, see himself, back being a successful psychologist, psychiatrist after the war was over. And that was one of the things that gave him the strength and the fortitude to not only get through it, but also helped him to develop his life after it. He saw it. He used his imagination. He used his faith. He used what energy he had to put himself in those situations, while he was physically stuck in the worst situation humanly possible. And,
Hmm.
that's, he credits his imagination and his faith to being, two of the strongest components to help him get to the other side of that. In fact, I wrote a song recently about, I was playing the song for John the other day and he liked it. God only knows if and when we'll put it out, but it's called, The Other Side. And like what is some of the verses? Basically the tagline of the song is try to see your troubles from the other side, and
Hmm.
not the other side of, not the other side of like the flip side, trying to see yourself on the other side of this uh, obstacle. Like it's not a matter of just
Right.
pushing the obstacle out of the way or dealing with it, but also seeing yourself saying, okay, I've defeated that. Seeing yourself saying, I can see myself really enjoying the fact that I, got past this. It's the same thing with this pandemic. Everybody will get to the other side and we'll become stronger and better for it. And part of that is knowledge of how human beings work, but part of that is also imagination of saying, yeah, this is what's going to happen because I say it will. And we all
Yeah.
do that.
Actually, I think
We all do that consciously or subconsciously every single second of every single day, whether we realize it or not.
And I think there was a quote actually from Einstein where he said something to the effect of imagination is more important than raw intelligence or
Exactly.
just book smarts or something like that.
Exactly. Exactly. Imagination is, it was imagination that dared me to think that I could move drums to the front of a stage and be a lead singer of a band, being a drummer. And, when everyone told me I couldn't, and it's not that I'm so great that I managed to make it happen. It's just a lot of it was just kind of having the naivete to allow myself to think about it and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So
All right, cool.
how
Well,
about
I
them
think
apples?